He's a bit shell-shocked.
I beg your pardon, Sergeant. There is no such thing as shell shock.
Wars are fought on the basis of trust. Ideally, a soldier should be able to trust his country. Ideally, he should be able to trust that he and his fellow soldiers are fighting and dying for a good enough reason. And ideally, a soldier should be able to trust that his commanders, the men who hold his life in their hands, are all of sound judgment and character. If neither the country, the cause, or the commander are perfect or infallible, they should, at least, ideally, have some regard for both the soldier's life and his dignity. The frustration that Paths of Glory inspires in the viewer comes from watching what happens when that trust is betrayed, when men are put in unwinnable situations, when men are treated as disposable by the people and institutions to which they've already sacrificed so much.
Order the 75s to commence firing on our own positions. Captain, do you fail to comprehend the meaning of my order?
During World War II, a battalion of French soldiers are ordered to carry out an impossible attack on German territory. When the attack inevitably fails, 3 men are chosen as scapegoats to be tried and executed for cowardice, with the only thing standing between them and the firing squad being their Colonel Dax. Paths of Glory is a bit of an oddity as far as war films go. Whereas many war films immediately following World War II adhered to a more patriotic us versus them type of attitude, Paths of Glory, released in 1957, seems to preempt more of the cynicism and mistrust of the Vietnam era, of films like Platoon, Apocalypse Now, and Kubrick's own Full Metal Jacket. One might even accuse the film of being too cynical, of painting its antagonists with too broad a brush. General Moreau, in particular, is such an irredeemable blend of hubris, pretense, and callousness, going so far as to order a bombing of his own men that you can't but think of him as anything other than outright evil. The upside of the film's near-relentless cynicism, however, is that more than just a social commentary about the abuses of power, the whole thing becomes a kind of existential nightmare. It's a story about ordinary men rendered powerless and small in the face of a malicious, unreasoning conspiracy. You could draw a lot of comparisons between Paths of Glory and Franz Kafka's The Trial. Of the 3 men chosen to stand trial, one of them is chosen at random, one because he's a social undesirable, and the other, who wasn't even conscious during the battalion's ill-fated attack, because of a conflict with his commanding officer. The men find themselves as sacrifices in what is essentially a show trial, branded as cowards to deflect blame from the poor leadership of their commanders. Everything is pretense. The men have already been earmarked for execution. Basic due process is suspended in favor of expediency. Anytime Colonel Dax tries to confront his superiors as men to appeal to their humanity, they immediately default to their authority. Either that or they pass the blame on to someone else.
Colonel Dax, we think we're doing a good job running the war. You must be aware of the fact that the General Staff is subject to all kinds of unfair pressures from newspapers and politicians.
Paths of Glory also seems to be a film out of time in terms of style. Kubrick combines a black and white austerity with the type of fluid dynamic camera work that would not only define his career, but would come to influence so many other more modern war films. Kubrick leads the viewer through the trenches. He sends the viewer racing across the battlefield. There's an immersive newsreel quality to some of the footage, while still highlighting Kubrick's signature formalism. The linear orderliness of the trenches seems to contrast the irrational, unchecked whims of the battalion commanders. That's part of that existential dread, is the idea that the battlefield might have made more sense. Lastly, the ending. What is the viewer to make of the ending? After the execution of the 3 men, a young German woman is brought out in front of a group of Dax's soldiers. The men are wild and lecherous. The young woman is frightened to the point of tears. But then as the young woman begins to sing, a German folk song called The Faithful Hussar, the men are all soothed like wild beasts, some of them brought to tears themselves as they sing along. That these men have found some sliver of beauty and humanity in the middle of so much misery and hell, that much is obvious. But is there anything else to be inferred from the men being so moved by a song belonging to the enemy? Is it maybe that these men have been so betrayed by their own country, have been rendered so disposable that the delineation of us versus them has withered away? Is the song meant to symbolize a broken trust in their own country, in their own folk songs? Contrast the faithful Hussar with the French national anthem played during the opening credits, and you have almost an inverse of the sentiment displayed in the more conventionally patriotic Casablanca, in which the French national anthem drowns out the German singing. What does it mean exactly? I don't know. But what I do know is that Paths of Glory is a pretty good movie.